Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for the best college football analysis, discussion, and debate. I am Alex Galbraith. Some of you guys may know that I've been on Mark Rogers TV a couple of times doing live streams, some videos like this, and then, of course, instant analysis and some discussion during the regular season of college football. And now I have joined Mark Rogers TV, so you'll see me doing these type of videos a little bit more, certainly helping out with some live streams a little bit more like I have a little bit this past month, and then also doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes to continue to make Mark Rogers TV even better for you guys, the hardcore fans. And as always, we really appreciate your support. It's what keeps these pages going. It's what we love to do, what you guys love to do, and so we are happy to be doing this for you. And so I'm really thrilled to be here on board with Mark Rogers TV, and I can't wait to continue to produce more content and help make this page even better and better. And I also have my own YouTube channel, The Gridiron Expert, over there. Some of you guys may watch it. We do college football predictions. We're doing our game-by-game predictions for each Power 5 school, and then we'll do our conference recaps for the Group of 5 schools. And then the regular season, we do a little bit some predictions there. We break down some of the week's best games, do some recaps of the crazy weeks of college football. So we have a lot of stuff going along year-round. But please go check us out over there at The Gridiron Expert. So today we're going to be discussing some Washington football. This is something that's been on our list for a while now, and we're just now getting to it. And Washington, a team that I really like this season. I know a lot of people, I know Phil Steele and a couple other analysts have Washington making the college football playoff for the second time since 2016, second time in 3 years. And this is certainly a Washington Huskies team that can do that. Chris Petersen, a heck of a head coach, entering his 5th year with the Huskies. Hard to believe that's been that long. He's entering year 5 with them and has compiled a 37-17 record with Washington, but only has one bowl win. He's gotten them to a bowl game all 4 of the seasons that he's been here, but has only won one of those games, and that was over Southern Miss back, I believe, in 2015. He did get them to the college football playoff in 2016, lost that game to Alabama, and that's, of course, respectable, and then lost to Penn State last year in the Fiesta Bowl, 35-28. But this year, he returns maybe what might be his best team that he's had at Washington. 8 returning starters on offense, 9 returning starters on defense. And we'll start on the offensive side of the ball, kind of break them down a little bit before we get too far in to the schedule and the defense and stuff like that. We've got quarterback Jake Browning returning for the Huskies this year. And it feels like Jake Browning's been here at quarterback at Washington forever. And it might be so because he is just 1,117 yards away from being the #1 career passer in Washington history. And I think he will certainly break that potentially by the halfway point of the season, maybe even before that. Some people even have him pegged as a dark horse Heisman contender. So we know he's capable of putting up some big-time numbers, and I can't wait to see what he does this year. They have their running back, Myles Gaskin. He's 52 yards away from being the #1 overall leading rusher in Washington history. And I could see him even reaching that mark in week 1 against Auburn and Atlanta. So they have a solid 1-2 punch with Jake Browning and Myles Gaskin, a dominant ground game. He can catch passes out of the backfield, and Jake Browning, one of the better quarterbacks, or if not the best quarterback in the Pac-12. On offense, on the wide receiving position, they're going to have tight end Hunter Bryant. They're going to have Aaron Fuller and Chico McClatcher at wide receiver. And then they're also going to have another tight end and Drew Sample, the senior there. So a really solid receiving core for Jake Browning. So he's going to have plenty of weapons to throw to. And this offense will once again be really potent. From an offense last year that averaged 36.2 points per game. And those numbers could even increase this year, which is pretty scary to think about, especially for those Pac-12 opponents. They have returned 4 of their offensive linemen, including Trey Adams at left tackle and Nick Harris, who's just a junior, but a very solid starter at the center position. So they're going to have great protection for Browning, should have great protection for Browning, and then creating some space and creating some holes for Myles Gaskin to get some big-time runs on the ground. So this is an offense led by Chris Petersen. We saw the type of offense he had at Boise State, always solid. Brought over here to Washington, done a great job transforming them, and I expect them to put up some big-time numbers this season. They had a total 7 seniors on the offensive side of the ball. So this is going to be the year, if they want to get back to the college football playoff, they certainly need to do it. On defense, they're going to be led by Ryan Bowman and Greg Gaines on the defensive line. So some solid starters there. They got Tevis Bartlett and Ben Burr-Kirven on the linebacking core. Probably one of the biggest strengths of this Washington defense. Ben Burr-Kirven was the leading tackler for the Huskies last year with 84, so it's great to get him back at that linebacking position. In the secondary, though, I personally believe that the secondary is going to be the best position group of this Washington defense, going to be very, very strong, potentially one of the better secondaries in the entire nation. You've got Byron Murphy, Jordan Miller, JoJo McIntosh, and Taylor Rapp. All 4 of those guys return from last season. Those four guys combined for 7 interceptions, but it doesn't sound like much until you realize that Washington had 14 interceptions last year. So those 4 guys had half of Washington's interceptions from last season, and we had Byron Murphy had 3 interceptions. He led the team last year with 3 interceptions. So 3 of those 7 and 3 of the 14 came by Byron Murphy. So this is a strong secondary. It's going to be very tough for their Pac-12 opponents and really anybody to throw against this Washington defense. They have 6 seniors on the defensive side of the ball, and last year the defense just allowed 16.1 points per game. So you list all those players I just had there, 9 total starters returning. It's scary to think that those numbers could even decrease as well, and you could see Washington allow less than 16 points per game next year. It's really hard to believe. This is a very solid Washington team. A little bit of a recap last year in 2017. I thought Washington was going to do a little bit better. They went 10-3 on the year, 10-2 in the regular season. They lost to Arizona State, and Arizona State did a great job, great defensive performance last year, holding Washington at home at Arizona State to 230 yards of total offense. So, I mean, that's a heck of a job. With the returning starters they had last year, with the type of offense they had last year with Browning and Gaskin and their wide receivers, the fact they held them to 230 yards is a pretty impressive feat. Washington was number 5 at the time. They lost that game 13-7. It was a really big defensive battle. Washington defense did a great job, just couldn't get the job done in the end, and they dropped from number 5 to number 12 after that game. They slowly worked their way back up. They played Stanford, the game that really decided the Pac-12 North Division. Had Washington won this, they would have won the Pac-12 North, made the Pac-12 championship game, but they lost to the Cardinal 30-22. And after that, I think that was revenge for Stanford. Stanford wasn't even ranked at the time. But back in 2016, Washington, I think their coming out party to show they were legit college football playoff contenders. They beat Stanford, who I believe was number 7 or number 10 at the time. They beat them 44-6. So that was kind of Stanford's way of punching them in the mouth and saying, "No, we're going to win the Pac-12 North, and this is what you get for beating us this bad." Back in 2016, they got a big time win, 30-22 over the Huskies, and that gave Stanford the Pac-12 North title. That won the Pac-12 North for Stanford and knocked Washington out with their second conference loss. And I think had they beaten Stanford, you could have maybe seen Washington slip in to the college football playoff. Their lone loss would have been to Arizona State, assuming they would have beaten USC in the Pac-12 championship game. But had they beaten them, you could have seen Washington slip into the top 4. Not saying it would have happened, but that Stanford game is what really hurt them. Really, if Washington had to split that series against Arizona State and Stanford, maybe they could have made the top 4. But they finished 10-2 on the year. Went to the Fiesta Bowl, so another New Year's Six Bowl under Chris Peterson. They lost to Penn State 35-28, which looks respectable, and it was. You got to give them give them a lot of credit for coming back, but they were down 28-7 in the second quarter. So they outscored Penn State 21-7 over the remainder of the game, but just couldn't get the job done in the end, losing 35-28 there. So a 10-3 record. Some still has a bit of a disappointment, but still a solid year for the Huskies. Now they move on to 2018. And I think this Washington team, like I said, is probably Chris Peterson's best that he's had. And his team has a lot of similarities to the 2016 team that made the college football playoff, losing 24-7 to Alabama on that national semifinal game. The schedule actually works out pretty well for Washington this season. They've got Auburn to open up the season in Atlanta. That's one that I'm really looking forward to. One that I think a lot of analysts have as really being a play-in game for the college football playoff because, Auburn and Washington, both college football playoff contenders, absolutely, but odds are that the winner of that game is not going to run the table afterwards. Washington and Auburn are bound to lose at least one game. One of them is going to lose to each other in the opening week of the season, but odds are neither of them are going to go undefeated, more than likely. So, the winner of this is going to have a great big-time win at a neutral site to throw onto their resume over a potential top 10 team. If it's not top 10, at least top 15. And the loser might have to run the tables all the way. And if they lose to a quality opponent if they want to try to make the college football playoff. So this is an Auburn team led by Jarrett Stidham and one of the better defensive lines in all of college football that a lot of people are favoring over Washington. But I like the Huskies in this one personally. I love their offense. I think their defense isn't getting a lot of credit. I know they lost some big-time starters last year or coming into this year, but this is a solid Washington team. And so it's going to really be up to that Auburn defensive line. Can they get enough pressure on Jake Browning? Can they shut down Myles Gaskin? Can they hold him, maybe to less than 100 yards and force Washington to win this game through the air? This is going to be Auburn's third straight game in Atlanta. They faced Georgia in the SEC championship game, lost to Central Florida in the Peach Bowl. I like Washington in this one, but barely. It's going to be a great game, great offensive-minded coaches, and Chris Peterson, Gus Malzahn going at it. Expect to see some trick plays, has the potential to be high-scoring. It's going to come down to defense, and despite Auburn maybe having a better defensive line, I like the Huskies in that one, but certainly a game that we're all looking forward to, one that has major playoff implications. Really, when I look at Washington's schedule, I see maybe 5 games that I think could be tough for Washington, Auburn being one of them. On the road at Oregon, on the road at California, I know is a surprise to some people. We'll touch on that. They get Stanford at home, probably their biggest threat in the Pac-12 North, and then Utah on the road as well. Always a difficult place to play. You got Oregon coming off a bye when they face Washington, and it's at Oregon. So one of the more difficult places to play in the Pac-12, maybe even in the nation. Oregon averaged 49.6 points per game last year with Justin Herbert before he got hurt. And then he got hurt for 5 games, missed 5 straight games. They lost 4 of those next 5 games without Herbert, and in 3 straight games, all losses after his injury, they combined for just 31 points. So they were just averaging a little over 10 points per game in those 3 straight losses they had after his injury. So it shows you just how big of a playmaker, how big of a difference maker Herbert makes for this Oregon team. So if they can stay healthy, this is an Oregon team that could surprise a lot of people. Could maybe even win the Pac-12 North. They get to host Stanford. They get to host Washington. So those are their top 2 competitors, and they get to host them both. But if they can't stay healthy, it could be another rough year for Mario Cristobal in his first year with the Ducks. But by far one of the toughest games for Washington going into the 2018 season with it being on the road. Stanford, home game for them. I put that there because Stanford is going to have another solid year as well. 9 returning stars on offense, 6 on defense. You got Bryce Love at running back, so it's going to be up to the Washington defense to shut down Bryce Love, who's probably the Heisman frontrunner going into the season. I actually do like KJ Costello at the quarterback position for the Cardinal. Washington does get to host the Cardinal, though. And like Stanford last year, Washington's going to have a little bit of revenge over the Cardinal after the Cardinal kept them out of the Pac-12 championship game last year in 2017. So, it's going to be a tough game, but I think Washington could probably handle that one. And then maybe 2 toss-ups. Some people might not consider these, tough games. But you got California and Utah both on the road. And California, a team that I think could surprise some people. 18 returning stars. And I really, really like their quarterback in Ross Bowers. I think he put up some solid numbers last year. Expect the numbers to improve even more this year. Their defense, they got Luke Beckett, some solid defensive linemen. And then their secondary, like Washington, is going to be very, very strong for the Golden Bears. So it's on the road. It's late in the season. I wouldn't overlook this California team. If I was telling any Pac-12 team, I would not overlook this California team. And they face California on the road right before Stanford, which makes it all the more interesting because you can't help but think maybe Washington might be overlooking California, looking a little too far ahead to Stanford, and then you go to California on the road, and the Golden Bears maybe pull off a major upset that could shake up the rankings and could potentially ruin Washington's college football playoff hopes. So they certainly don't want to overlook that. And then Utah, they face in just the 3rd week of the season. Another solid offense, another solid defense. Kyle Whittingham doing a great job as head coach there. But it's a difficult place to play 2 years ago. I know it's different teams. You can't relate everything to what happened last year or the year before. But 2 years ago at Utah, Washington only won that game 31-24. Of course, different teams this year for both of them, for Utah and Washington. But, still on the road. Anytime you have a road game in any conference, you don't want to overlook it. Home field advantage is a big part in what I do when I do my predictions. So it's a big advantage for any team. We actually did a study on that on the Gridiron Expert. You can go check that out. But Utah, it's the 3rd week of the season, and Washington by that point would have already played Auburn. I think they're going to be more battle-tested, so they should get the win over the Utes, but certainly a game they can't afford to overlook, but would certainly be better to lose early than it would be to lose late to California or Stanford. So this is certainly, like I said, we highlighted the Washington offense and the defense and the schedule and what they're a little bit of a chip on their shoulder from what happened last year. By far, I think Chris Peterson's best team with the Huskies. I think this Washington team is very, very similar to the 2016 team. Solid offense, big-time numbers, very, very solid defense as well, especially in the secondary. It would not surprise me to see Washington get back to the college football playoff. They could even lose a game and still get back to the college football playoff. They lost to USC back in 2016 and still slipped in, beat Colorado in the Pac-12 championship game, got into the college football playoff. Maybe they lose a game this year. Maybe it's to Auburn. Maybe it's to Oregon. Maybe it's to Stanford. Probably the 3 toughest tests, I think. Maybe they get upset big time to Utah or California. But I think Oregon, Auburn, and Stanford are their most likely bets for a loss for the Huskies. But most of those coming early on in the season. So it would be good for Washington to get those out of the way, run the tables, the rest, face USC or Utah or maybe even in Arizona in the Pac-12 championship game, win that, and then wait for their fate for the college football playoffs. But I'm telling you what, if they can get that win over Auburn, things are going to be looking really good for Chris Peterson and this Huskies team. And I personally do see the Huskies making their 2nd college football playoff appearance in the past 3 years. So a great year for Washington. As you all know, we have media days that have started this week. Tons of coverage, tons of content coming out over the next couple of weeks. So make sure you continue to come back here to Mark Rogers TV for the best media day coverage, probably in the nation. So please come check us out here for some great college football discussion, debate, and analysis. And always, you can go check me out on the Gridiron Expert as well. So please continue to come to Mark Rogers TV, and always leave a like, comment, and subscribe.